Alrighty guys, I've been wanting to do this review for a week now because I wanted to just kind of gestate my feelings on the game in general for Resident Evil Requiem, as this was my most anticipated game of the year. I don't think anything else comes close, and there are parts of the game that, yes, it was a great game, but there are also some parts where I generally had like some questions and concerns about. So let's just kind of get into like my favorite part of it. I think the best part of this game is the hospital, guys. The hospital is the best part. From the moment you step through those doors, those double doors, something just clicks. It's the lights, it's the corridors, it's the way it's all set up, and it's set up to scare you. It's set up to be scary, and like you have to be methodical through this section. You have a scarce inventory to begin with. All you have is the big Requiem gun. That's all you have. And through exploring it, you find more weapons, you find more stuff you can craft, and through time it does get easier, but you still have to be methodical and strategize going through that section. And I haven't really felt like I had to do that in a Resident Evil game since RE2, where it's in this tight space. Now you can say 7 kind of has that, 8 kind of has that with the Lady Dimitrescu section, but it never felt close to RPD. It never close to that feeling when you get going through RPD, going back to get stuff, going there. And it does, I think this is the best we've seen, kind of, not in the same vein as RPD, but just kind of similar layout and the same kind of feeling you get going through there. Even if you don't have a Mr. X chasing you. And I just loved it. If you love RPD, man, I think this part of the game just fits to that love, and like it's kind of like, I will say this, Requiem is a love letter to every Resident Evil that's come before, and I think this is what this part of the game honors, that legacy of Resident Evil 2, and especially to the RPD, which we do actually go to the RPD later on in the game. And then speaking more on the RPD, and since we're on that subject, actually getting to walk through RPD again, brilliant. It was so many emotions. You don't overstay your welcome as well. It's treated as kind of, kind of like, oh, walking down memory lane. The development team clearly understood that this location carries enormous weight for fans such as myself, and they honor that, returning to the halls, recognizing the bones of a place where you once mapped out, maliciously in your head when you were younger, and something like genuinely moving. It's fan service done right, and I feel like sometimes, like, I think a lesser studio would have just like, let's just put in all this fan service, jump it all in here. They really just like kind of like, hey, here's the weapons locker room, here's where you saw liquors for the first time, here's the code to get one of the pieces to get into the bottom room so you can escape the RPD. Here's the keys to get into the rooms to find clues. Like, I loved keeping all that, and of course Tofu returned. Tofu, loved that. And then even in the story elements as well, with the reveals. Now let's talk about like the reveal that like made me lose my mind and everyone else. Wesker, but not really Wesker in a sense. I'm not going to pretend I expected it, because I did not expect Wesker, or a version of Wesker, to show up in this game at all. Nobody did, and that's the beauty of Requiem. It earns it. It's not a shock value. It's like it's not shock value for the sake of shock value, if you know what I mean. The groundwork is laid carefully enough that when it lands, you're not confused, you're not floored. The lore threads connect in a way that feels satisfying rather than contravened. And it opens the door for where this franchise could go generally in exciting ways. That will be another video we'll be making very soon. It's one of those moments that reminds you why you invested in this series over decades. When a long-running franchise can generally surprise you, that's something worth celebrating. This brings me to one of the most underrated strengths, how it handles nostalgia, honestly. Like, here's what separates a good legacy sequel from a desperate one. Requiem understands that fan service should feel rewarded, not a matchmaking checklist. The inclusion of characters like Mr. X and, if you Hunk, even if that is like kind of not really Hunk but also is Hunk, is handled with real care. They're not shoehorned in for a trailer moment or a cheap pop. Their presence feels like organic, like there's a purpose and respectful of what made those characters iconic in the first place. Nobody's stopping the game to wink at the camera and say, hey, remember this? The references breathe. They exist within the world rather than outside of it. And for a franchise with this much history, the discipline to pull off stuff like Mr. X, Hunk, and even Wesker, they did it perfectly. Requiem pulls it off. And can we take a moment just to appreciate that Leon Kennedy motorcycle sequence? Because it's absolutely a blast. See, with that sequence in my mind, it could have easily become an RE6 or catastrophe, because if you've played RE6, there's a lot of, kind of moments where like, oh, you gotta press a certain button, you gotta do a certain thing. I go to the beginning of RE6, we gotta do the helicopter, you gotta run away from the explosion. It's just kind of like, you push a button and then something happens. It could have been, it felt very much like that, but in a way, it's a sequence that it feels like this is what RE6 should have been. It's explosive. It's kind of a set piece that reminds you of the series can be spectacle without abandoning what makes it feel Resident Evil. Leon has always had a certain cinematic flair and energy to him, and that man was born for moments like that. Fast, fluid, and just self-aware enough to be fun without becoming parody. More of it. Please, more of that, please, if we're going to have more action in Resident Evil. And then I'm going to get into kind of my biggest flaw of this game. That is the multiple choice ending. Let's be honest about where Requiem stumbles, because it does stumble. First, the multiple choice ending, it wasn't really needed at all. There's a version of this idea that could work in a Resident Evil game down the line, but Requiem is not, we don't really need this. The narrative doesn't branch meaningfully, leading to a moment so that a choice feels like, oh, I gotta make a choice, and it's gonna be earned those choices. It ends up like kind of diluting what should have been definitive, powerful conclusion. When a game makes you choose how its story ends without preparing you for the weight of that choice, it doesn't feel empowering. It kind of feels forced, and it kind of just feels like, oh, here's something for the cultists who want Leon Kennedy to, die. Spoiler alert. And my thing is if you're going to do an ending like that, let me fight Zeno, let me fight Wesker, with a battered Leon. But no, it's just like cutscene, game end. And then they literally say do you want to do the other ending? It's so basically you're telling me that this is just a fanfic ending. The real ending is where you actually have to fight a boss. And let's get into the boss fights, guys, the boss fights. There's not a whole ton of boss fights, but there are some. But they're too easy. They're too short. Over both, the tension has any chance to build into something actually memorable, where it actually feels like, I beat that boss, yay me. This isn't an isolated problem, guys. It's a pattern throughout this game. Boss encounters in Requiem feel kind of, not difficult. They're not difficult compared to boss fights just like Mr. X in RE2, Nemesis in RE3, even a lot of the bosses in RE4, they are difficult. It takes multiple times. In here, if you're playing on standard, you can beat Mr. X in one try. I beat Mr. X in one try. I beat the Fat Chungus monster in one try. Sure, it took me maybe 2 tries for Gideon, but it was never difficult. That's my problem with that. The lack of difficulty is just Resident Evil, to me, the bosses are difficult. That's the point, which makes the game so fun. And it's I'm gonna do this differently this time. There wasn't that. There was not that in this game. And I think that's one of the flaws, that the boss fights are way too easy. And my verdict kind of on the game. Resident Evil Requiem is not a perfect game. It's not the best one ever made. But it is generally, to me, a top 5 RE game. To me, it's top 5. The hospital section alone is worth the price of this game. Of course, another price of this game is Leon. Whenever you're Leon, it is the most satisfying and fun time I have had playing Resident Evil since RE4. Since RE4, have had this fun. The Wesker reveal was oh my god, was pure nostalgia. Having Mr. X, Hunk, and the Leon sequence with the motorcycle in Raccoon City, that was just so much fun, and a sequence I can honestly replay and watch others see just over and over again. I'd say in terms of boss battles, it fumbles to finish the line with a final boss that underwhelms, and with an ending structure that kind of, it's like, it wasn't the best ending to a Resident Evil game. It wasn't. It really wasn't. I feel like the end of the game kind of didn't really stick the landing. It didn't get it right. For the franchise that's been kind of on a really good streak, I think this is a very good game. I do not hate this game. I do think it's top 5, though. I do think this is a top 5 game. I think the Grace opening in the hospital and all that, I think that is the highest point in the game. Raccoon City is fun, but it does get a bit dry after a while because you keep on seeing the same environments. Going through RPD is just a blast. It's a member berry path, and I would say my few criticisms. We did not need a multiple choice ending. I think that's kind of a miss. And another thing that I think the boss battles could be more difficult, but to me, this is a solid 9 out of 10. Listen, do I like this game more than 7 and 8? Yes, I do. I think 7 is the scariest game in the franchise. I really do think 7 is the scariest game. 8 kind of just goes for that action piece. There are horror elements, but like, I don't see a lot of replayability in 8. It's just like, if this game is like, okay, I'm good. I thought 8 is very good. I thought it was a very good close to Ethan Winters' story. But going into this, I was excited because, of course, you got Leon, you got the nostalgia of Raccoon City, and I think they did an excellent job here. Now, I think it's too early to call this game of the year, but to me, this is my game of the year. I don't care what anything else comes out. This is my game of the year. This is what it gave me, what I wanted, and much more than I didn't expect. And also, stay tuned, guys, for what we do next, as we are going to have a very fun video coming out tomorrow once this review drops, so look out for that. It's going to be a kind of, breaking down the ending and where we can go with a DLC or an RE10. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.